Let's go into the first question. So Bertito, Miguel, what could we expect from Recovery Jumpstart program number 2? So it's actually it's not the second program, we had a few more than that. So this, you can expect a lot of things. I can't go too much into detail because I'd be here for a while, but essentially if you go to the application page, I'll put in the comments below, but if you go into the application page, it breaks down pretty much the whole program. Let me actually go there right now so I could read it out and I don't mess this up. So essentially, it's a 6-week training program designed to help people struggling with CFS, panic disorder, hypersensitive nervous system learn how to once and for all overcome the fatigue, pain, and symptoms that come along with the illness. So there's a lot of support, a lot of hands-on support. There's check-in calls, there's group coaching calls, and even after those initial 6 weeks, there are a lot of calls in I call it the Thriver mentorship. So after Recovery Jumpstart, you're placed into the Thriver mentorship, where there's ongoing continued support. And that way you're not like left out on your own, or I'm not like, okay, good luck, take what I learned and go apply it. No, pretty much the program ends when you recover. You set that deadline for yourself. So it never really expires. It's finished when you do recover. So there's lots of video modules. We go a lot more in depth on these calls than I do on YouTube. So I'm also, actually all of us are coming up with solutions for your specific situation. It's no cookie cutter stuff. It's all very tailored to your specific situation. And we're talking almost every day because we have a Discord channel as well. So you can message me directly. You get that ongoing support. But I'm going to post it in the comments right now. You'll be able to see all the details over there. It's a great question. So Sarah, I've been working to overcome CFS for so long, 23 years, that it seems like I have a bad association with most any activity. What advice do you have for someone to help deal with this? How to re-engage with life without overwhelming yourself with triggers? Thank you so much. Yeah, it's a good question. When you have this for that long, then your brain will be set in its ways. It's going to be harder and harder to rewire your brain. Because after having it for so long, think about it as if you're trying to hike up a mountain, right? If you're always taking one trail, and people are always taking one trail, then it's going to be easy to go up that path because that path is already carved out. Whereas if you try to go up a new path, it's very foreign to your brain. Maybe you have done it before, but trying to do that versus going on the path that you've always walked down, it's a lot harder because now you're trying to like create a new path, if that makes sense. So it takes a lot of work, takes a lot of consistency. It's not going to be easy, I'll tell you right now, but you have to be like very consistent. Start with swatting away those negative thoughts you have about activity. And it starts with baby steps as well. Like it's hard to answer this question hard to fully answer this question in like a few minutes because there's so many things we have to do. There are a lot of beliefs that we have to change. You probably have some limiting beliefs and probably think that everything that you do is probably going to make you worse, whereas that's not the case. So we need to rewire that first, because when you stop fearing the activities or get it out of your head that there's consequences or quote unquote consequences with every activity that you do, then you'll be less anxious when you do a lot of the stuff and less stressed when you do a lot of stuff. Less stress equals less symptoms. So a lot of the symptoms we feel from doing activities, it's from the stress that comes with it. It's from what we think is gonna happen after, when we think we're gonna crash, things like that. So how to re-engage with life without overwhelming yourself with triggers. You got to do something we cover in the program as well, is you have to slowly expand your world. You don't want to just jump right back into everything because it's going to be too overwhelming for your nervous system. So you have to take it slow by slow. As you get better over time, you're able to expand your world. And what do I mean by that? It's like when I was completely bedridden, it's not like I just jumped back into the world and picked up right where I left off. No, I was bedridden. Then I started moving around a bit more in my room. Then it went from my room to being able to go to the washroom, then the living room, then the cafeteria in the hospital, and then moving around on a wheelchair around the hospital. So it was like in steps. I can just throw myself out there. And that way, was it physically overwhelming, like a little bit? Yeah, it was definitely. Like I was shaking and buzzing all the time. because there's just so much stimulus for my body after being bedridden for like 8 months. But when you take baby steps like that, you give your body time to adjust and like recalibrate itself to this new level of activity. So baby steps, I would think of it that way. Like the devil is in the details. Really focus on the small steps you have to take. Try to be consistent with that, and then you'll be surprised at how far you can get a month down the road or 2 months down the road. You can make a lot of progress in that time if you just be consistent. Rosalind, I'd love to hear any tips to stop predicting crashes and not let them get your mood so down when they do happen. Sometimes I alternate between discouraged and depressed and then determined. I'd like to minimize the discouraged feelings because I know they don't help. Any tips to try to stop predicting crashes? So, Rosalind, when you say predicting crashes, like, are you anticipating the crash? Like when you go do something, or are you predicting, are you telling yourself like, oh, I'm definitely gonna crash from this? Because if that's the case, then there's a very high chance that you will crash. Whereas also we have to look at it, is it a crash or is it an adjustment period? Because a lot of people confuse the two and they're not the same thing. Even just the label we put on it, if we call it an adjustment period, it's a lot easier to deal with that and easier to manage than a crash. Because when we think of crash, we think of, oh, back to square one, we're going backwards, 2 steps back. We just took 1 step forward, 2 steps back. It's not the most positive thing. It's actually has a more kind of negative tone to it. Small things like this, even just the label we put on things, makes a big difference. But yes, when you are in adjustment periods, they can get your mood down. It's something we dive deep into as well, helping people understand the difference between adjustment periods and crashes. Now, if it is a crash, crashes are really like if you are completely wiped out, like you can't get out of bed, you can't really function normally, and you're holding on for dear life. That's what a crash is. An adjustment period is more so like you're feeling a bunch of symptoms. And I just filmed a video about this, which I'll be releasing on my channel, but there's like, you have the primary symptoms, which is like the fatigue, the buzzing and wired feeling, the general anxiety, the brain fog. And on top of that, things that come and go are a bit more intense symptoms like POTS, tinnitus, vertigo, migraines, lots of chronic pain, things like that. So those are almost like adjustment period symptoms, and they can be a mix between the two. Really try to identify, are you really in a crash or is it more so an adjustment period? And I created a video in detail about this actually really recently. So I hope that helps, Rosalind. How's it going, Tally? Cool, Bertito. Hey, Loretta. We got a good question from Tally. What to do when some activity occurs that has to happen but isn't in our baseline? For example, I had to go to the doctor. Another example, hubby is sick, so I had to get groceries. I'm having to do more than I'm used to because hubby is unable to do the cooking, etc. at this time. He's in quarantine. Okay, yeah, a lot of people getting COVID nowadays. Hopefully he's okay. I'm sure he's gonna bounce back. But what to do when some activity occurs that has to happen but isn't in our baseline? When things like that happen, I think even with baseline, a lot of times you get way too rigid with it. Like we'll have this kind of mental, we put ourselves in this like mental cage, and the baseline is almost taken too literal. It's like, oh, if I go outside my baseline even just a little bit, or if I even try going outside my baseline, I'm gonna crash and it's gonna be bad. So already we're like dooming ourselves from the start. So sometimes there are activities we have to do that we have no control over. So something like this, you got COVID, you had to pick up where he left off. And there's literally nothing you could do about it. Like you had to do it. So there's 0 point stressing about it. Of course, yes, you're gonna stress because it's a lot more responsibility, but stressing and worrying about it does not get you anywhere. Like it literally solves nothing. Like that's what I learned, is that there are times when it's okay to stress even just a little bit, because that's your brain being cautious. But with something like this, when there's no other option and you have to do this kind of stuff, then it's like, okay, let me just get it done, whatever happens. And the more you fear doing all these activities and going outside your comfort zone, the worse you're gonna feel, 100%. If you're nervous about going out, and yes, you'll be nervous when you're expanding your activity levels, but the more nervous you are, the worse you will feel. The more fear you have about doing activities, especially after you do the activities, you will feel a bit more wired. You will feel a few more symptoms. If you sit there and you're almost like bracing yourself for this storm to come, then yes, you will definitely have a crash or a really bad adjustment period, versus if you just do it and then you could become indifferent to the symptoms and stay calm and keep your composure. So keeping composure is like, that's another huge thing I have to constantly remind people. Even in the program, they're learning all this stuff, but it takes a while for it to click in. Like, it doesn't happen right away. So that's why I have the Discord groups on chatting with everybody. But good question though. It is a good question. So you want to become, you don't want to overthink this kind of stuff. Like, if you have no option to do it, then like, you just got to get it done and don't stress about what happens after. Of course, easier said than done, but don't catastrophize. I think that's the biggest thing. Hope that helps. Doris, I have no crashes, just slight ups and downs. I'm not really bad like bedbound, but also not good enough to have a normal life with work and hobbies, social life. I don't know how to handle this. It goes on for 3 years. Wow, it's a long time. Not like that. It's not getting worse, but also not better at all. Yeah, so it's a great question, Doris. Interesting. Okay, yeah. A lot of times, I actually just made another video about this too, about how a lot of times we're not super sick, but we're not great. So there's a massive gray area where we're in limbo. Like, there's a lot of things you can do and a lot of things you can't do. So it's like, what do you do to get to the next level? So yeah, we just need to identify what's keeping you stuck, right? Because I don't know your specific situation, but chances are, like what I'm thinking, at least what happened to me, is every time you try to do some things, then you'll have an adjustment period, and that will probably discourage you, and you'll probably feel like, oh, I'm going backwards. Oh man, I need to avoid all these symptoms. But the truth is, like, you need these adjustment periods to get better. So I think that's what's going on here, is you're probably getting discouraged every time you do have even slight adjustment periods when you're trying to expand your activity. I say this in a lot of my videos, and I'll say it right now, but your success, your success is determined by how well you respond to symptoms. So really just look at how you're responding to symptoms on a daily basis. Like, what is your perspective on your current situation? That's huge as well, because as we have this for a longer period of time, we almost start to lose hope, or we almost start to look at it as, oh man, like, this thing, I've tried everything, this is not going away, like, and it gets more frustrating. So the more frustrated we are as well, the slower recovery comes. Any kind of negative emotions will slow down recovery, and maybe they're not even conscious emotions, maybe they're like subconscious and thoughts and emotions. So really, you have to look inwards for this. There's like a mental block that's holding you back, because all CFS is our body, or our brain putting a limit on the amount of things that we can do, because it's trying to keep us put so that we're not introducing stress into our lives. And in order to get to like a normal functioning level, we have to retrain our brain and gain back trust with it, so that it will take off these limiters, like the fatigue and the pain and all the other weird symptoms, and it learns to trust us again as well, and it lets us do all this activity again. But it's a work in progress. Like, you have to gain trust with your brain has to gain trust with your body. It's almost a back and forth thing. If you have a lot of these thoughts that are holding you back, then that can definitely keep people stuck. Kept me stuck for like 4.5 years or so. Yeah. Yeah, so Rosalind, yeah, I'm anticipating it when I go to the doctor and stuff like that. Yeah, so that explains it. That's exactly why you're getting the crashes. Like, the moment you think you're gonna start crashing, like, you've already put yourself at a disadvantage, because now your brain is wired to probably crash, and then you're gonna start looking out for symptoms. So let's get a little bit more scientific here. There's something called a reticular activating system. Somebody go put that in the comments right now if you can, or maybe I'll find it. The reticular activating system, basically, seek and you shall find. Let me just type this in. When your brain is focused on certain things, or you have something in mind, then your brain will gravitate towards that. For example, if you're sitting in traffic or you're watching TV and you just tell yourself, okay, I'm gonna notice everything red. That's what I'm gonna notice. then it's likely you're probably going to see more red cars than usual. And then say you're out for an hour in traffic, and then you come home and then somebody asks you, okay, yeah, you were looking at all the red cars. How many green cars did you see? You're going to be like, well, nah, I remember like 2 or 3. There's probably a lot more, because what you focus on, that gets magnified. Like your brain starts to look for those things. So when you're telling yourself you're going to crash and things like that, your brain starts to look for symptoms to back up that belief. And it goes a lot deeper than that too, but that's like the overall, what do you call it, idea behind this kind of stuff. It's like, you don't want to even have that in your mind. The moment, like when you do have that in your mind, you just open the door to that possibility of crashing. Now, I'm not just saying ignore the symptoms and all that, ignore the crash. Like if it comes, then that's when you deal with it. But when you anticipate it and build it up, you're almost like, it's like a self-fulfilling prophecy. It will happen if that's what you're focused on, if that makes sense. So again, it's a lot easier said than done, right? Now I'm able to tell you guys all these things because I've done it. I've been through this, and I did a lot of the rewiring. So every time you do have those thoughts, you need to swat away those negative thoughts as much as you can. Like, it's not easy, and that's why most people stay stuck, because they'll try swatting away negative thoughts. They'll try shutting that anxiety down and stop thinking negative. They'll try it for like 1 week, 2 weeks, and they'll see very minimal results, and they'll be like, oh, okay, this doesn't work. But like, you can't just fix this problem in 1 or 2 weeks. Like, some people had this for years. So you can't expect the change to happen just like that, especially with the brain. You have to be very active in your recovery. It's not something that time just solves. You can't wait it out. So actually, back to what Doris was saying, time doesn't solve something like this. It can help you. It can, help you see some improvements, but you being active in the recovery and doing a lot of like the brain rewiring and things like that, changing your response to symptoms, that's 10 times more effective than time. So just to give you an idea, I was resting physically, I was eating perfectly healthy, I was living with my grandparents for about 6 months, and I was in the hospital for another month before I started getting better. So for 7 months, I was getting worse and worse, but I wasn't doing anything. I was just in bed, eating food, meditating like all day. That was for 7 months. And then, on the 8th month, that's when I met my doctor, and I was in the hospital. So I was eating crappier food. They tasted delicious, but it wasn't the best for me health-wise. I loved it though. It tasted delicious. I was moving a lot more. I was having more social activity, and I was healing like 50 times faster than when I was on my own. But that's because I was like doing all the right stuff. I wasn't leaving it up to time. Whereas before, I'd be like, if I just rest long enough, then my brain will sort itself out. But when you get caught in a downward spiral of like symptoms and anxiety and fear and panicking because of the symptoms and then digging yourself in a hole, like that's when you're in a downward spiral. So you need to be on the upward spiral. I've been reading this book. So this book actually talks a lot about like depression and how that can have physical symptoms in the body. But if you interchange CFS with any time it says depression here, it's pretty much the same thing. This is like how to rewire your nervous system. So I would highly recommend this book. It's super easy read. And as you're reading this, you'll probably be like, holy cow, I can totally relate to that. I can totally relate to that. So would highly recommend The Upward Spiral. You can get an audiobook or a book or whatever. That's one of the books my doctor recommended to me, along with The Brain's Way of Healing. I'd highly recommend those for just turning things around. But I hope that helps. Oh, let's see. No, that's another question. Okay, so Tally. Yes, the wired feeling after activities. I felt so much energy, but no, it was fight or flight. I'm definitely feeling an adjustment the past day or two, but still need to do more for us. I know physically to take breaks. What are some examples of how I can brain train through this? Well, brain train, so for you, Tally, because I know we talk a lot. We've talked a lot on an individual basis. For you, it's rewiring. Like, it's almost, you have to do actually less brain work than you're already doing. So here's another lesson for people. It's like a lot of times we think we need to add more things, more brain exercise and this and that, where in reality, you actually need to take away some things because you're thinking too much. But in terms of like brain retraining for this, it's like there's nothing specific. It's like I said, it goes back to the basics. Like when you start panicking and when, like I know for you, it's like when you have a lot of energy and then you go use it up and then you feel like horrible after, not even just physically, but mentally. You're like, oh man, I blew it. I had all this energy. Like you need to get rid of those mental roller coasters because that's going to continue to go on unless you step in there and stop it. So you actually need to stop that from happening. And for a lot of people, that's a common theme. It's like when we do have adjustment periods, we feel like we just lost the whole battle and we have to start from square one. But like I said, that's not the case. Adjustment periods are 100% necessary for recovery. I'll repeat, adjustment periods are 100% necessary for recovery. Without an adjustment period, you cannot recover and you will stay stuck. So I just want to put that out there. It's a bold statement, but it's literally the truth. So we always, I think in the early stages, we try to avoid symptoms as much as we can. We associate symptoms with bad things. We look at them as signs that we're going backwards, but those are the opportunities for you to rewire the brain. That's like actually when the training needs to be done, the rewiring of the thoughts. That's when it matters most. Those are like the crucial moments when you are in adjustment period. That's when you need to buckle down and really retrain the brain, because that's what's gonna determine if you get better or if you stay the same or if you get worse, right? So it goes back to the saying, your success in recovery is determined by how well you respond to symptoms. So just ask yourself, how are you responding to symptoms? And always just think about that. It's like, if there's one thing to take away from this call, Tally, it's your success is determined by how well you respond to symptoms. So if you're not responding well, if you're panicking and fear or always anxious about your symptoms, then yeah, you'll stay the same or if not get worse. But if you're able to see them as opportunities, and notice how I said opportunities, it's like a chance to get better. It's an opportunity. If you look at it that way, then you'll almost welcome them. It got to the point where I was excited about adjustment periods, even when I was like having burning eye sensations, burning pains all over my body, feeling lots of POTS. When I was pretty fatigued, even after I got out of the hospital, I was super excited because I knew I was getting to that next level. And even in Recovery Jumpstart, the recent group, we've been in there for about 3.5 weeks, and some people are already having mind shifts where they're excited for the next adjustment period. They're trying to nudge themselves into an adjustment period because they know that's the way to get to the next level. So if you think about it like a video game, there's different levels to recovery. There's different levels of progress. I'm not going to get too into it, but it's something we cover in the program. There's something called progress cycles. Think about it as cycles. A cycle is essentially you increasing activity, having an adjustment period, you handling that properly, and if you handle it properly, you're able to get to the next level. That right there is a progress cycle. So think about it almost like a video game, right? In the video game, there's different levels, right? And different levels have different bosses. Some levels are shorter, some levels are longer, some levels are harder. But unlike a video game, as you get further and further into your recovery, the levels get easier and easier. So in the beginning, that's actually when it's the hardest. So when you're playing this video game, when you're playing these different levels, and at the end of the level, you always run into a boss. Think of the boss like the adjustment period. Are you gonna beat that adjustment period? Are you gonna respond well to it? Or are you gonna like just collapse and go back to your old mindset and where you came from? No, if you respond well, you're able to beat that boss, and then you get to the next level. And then so the next level is gonna be a little bit easier. But most people get stuck on that first level because they always get flustered when the boss comes around. They don't know how to handle that. But it really comes down to how you deal with symptoms. But yeah, I hope that helps. Doris, thank you, Miguel. I guess you are right. I have a mental block and an unconscious one. That is hard to break. Yep, it takes a lot of work. The mental side of things, it's underestimated with this illness. Like, I know a lot of people say mindset. I like to call it brain wiring, because there's literally a physical thing happening in your brain. And when we're trying to change those things and change our thoughts, we are literally physically changing the neural pathways in our brain. And that's when I was all in on like rewiring everything. When my doctor told me, he's like, this is not just up in the clouds, it's not in your thoughts or something. Your thoughts aren't the only thing that's making you feel this way. You're actually stuck in a brain loop Like there's a physiological thing going on with your brain, but that's why they can't really find anything on tests, because it's not like you can scan a lot of the activities of the brain, but it's just really hard to distinguish what's going on. But my organs were fine, body was fine. I did like, I don't know how many tests, 20 different blood tests, x-ray scans, blah, blah, blah. The whole merry-go-round of tests. But yeah, they couldn't find anything. It's because the problem was in the brain. But that's how we approach it. And that's how pretty much everybody recovers. You listen to all these recovery stories, they'll all tell you it had a lot to do with rewiring the brain. Lorenzo, please comment on making plans and appointments and having to cancel at the last moment. Yeah, it's pretty straightforward. If you need to cancel stuff, then I think the one thing is don't feel guilty about doing that. Like a lot of times when we're sick, for example, if we're not doing much, our schedule's not too full, then this appointment or plan can feel really important to us. And that's like, to us, it's a huge event. To other people, it's just a normal thing in their lives. But this is because maybe we don't have much going on. So we might feel bad about canceling these things, but this is a time where you have to be selfish. Like you have to put yourself first, because if you can't draw the line and can't put up your boundaries, then you're always going to be saying yes to things and doing things that in your gut you probably shouldn't do. And then you're going to, stay stuck. So guilt is a huge thing in this area. It's learning to say no. So it's okay to say no. It doesn't make you a bad person, especially with appointments, doctors, whatever, things like that. If you can't do it, you can't do it. I stopped feeling bad about that when I was super sick, like could not get out of bed. And I would stress a little bit about not making an appointment, but I would just be like, man, if I can't make it, I can't make it. Like, what do you want me to do? I'm an absolute wreck. And if people didn't understand that, then that's too bad. Then that's their problem. Loretta, just wondering, how functional do you have to be able to participate in your program and be able to do and cope, and what is required on a daily basis, as it does take effort, thus using energy? I love how you asked that question, Loretta. Yeah, let's dive deep into this. So you don't even need to be super functional. We had a last recovery jumpstart in November, not the last one, but one of the ones back then. She could not get out of bed. When she did get out of bed for any emergencies or anything, she had to go on like a stretcher or a wheelchair. And couldn't even, sit up. But she was in the program. At the same time, there were other people in the program. For that intake, we only had 5 people. But yeah, she was completely bedridden. But then there were other people who were able to drive around the city, who were able to cook food sometimes. Other people were able to play guitar and play music. So it doesn't really matter where you're at, because the concepts and the frameworks are exactly the same to get to the next level in recovery. Whether you're completely bedridden or you're able to play music or you're able to drive around, it's the exact same approach. And it's really interesting, because I thought there would be an issue with this in the beginning. I was like, hey, how am I going to tailor my teaching and what we're learning to their specific situation? But that's why at the end of all the calls, we have like a Q&A where we dive deep into the specifics of people's situation. It's not like we spend hours on it, but we spend quite a few minutes per person. We just go around, and then everybody else is offering solutions as well. So it's really cool to see everybody come together. So that's what I would say about how functional do you have to be. There really is no limit, right? Unless you are completely stuck, like you can't even look at a screen. That's something you need to be on the calls every single week. Everybody who joins the program, they're definitely nervous about joining the program. Even some people even, they're like shaky on the call, and they have to turn their camera off. Maybe they're listening to it more like a podcast, and I totally get it. So that's cool. Like, as long as they make it to the call, and trust me, a lot of people underestimate what they're able to do just because they've been stuck for too long. But most people are able to make the call. Actually, everybody's able to make the call. Even if they think they can't, once they get on the call, they start to kind of cool down. Look at some of the testimonials on the site. There's a guy, Chris. Yeah, he was super wired before the calls. Now he gets through 2 hours like it's nothing. And he's just like going the whole time on some of our recent calls. On a daily basis, as in, yeah, it takes effort, thus using energy. Yeah, that's a great comment. And that is actually a very common misconception around CFS, is that everything we do takes energy, and we only have like a limited amount of energy. So if we add in, this brain rewiring and we start learning about this stuff, are we going to run out of energy? And it's not true. It's actually the opposite, because learning a lot of this stuff calms the anxiety. It lowers the stress on the system, and lowering the stress on the system actually gives you more energy. So in the program, people who are super nervous to come on that first call and even jump on the calls a few weeks in, halfway through the program or at the end of the program or whatever, they're having a lot more energy than when they came in. And they're doing a lot more too, because there are certain things we do in the program where I encourage people. I never push people to the point where like, I'm gonna make you crash. Definitely not. It's very individual based on where you're at right now, but I just provide the frameworks to help you get better. So on a daily basis, of course, there's gonna be a lot of internal work you have to do, and we actually have tasks, especially in the first 3 weeks. There's like 2 or 3 tasks a week, very simple, but that's what kind of allows people to have a lot of the mind shifts. Plus we're doing multiple calls a week just to keep people on track, and there's also individual check-ins to make sure nobody goes off the rails. But yeah, it's not easy, I'll tell you that. We have this support system so that way you're not going through it by yourself, and we have a Discord group. It's awesome. I'll probably post some pics at some point, but it's like if someone's having a rough day or someone's in an adjustment period, everybody kind of steps in and is like, oh, you could do it, you got this, oh, have you tried this? Don't worry about this. It's really cool to see everybody come together. Yeah, and I'm right there by your side the whole time. You get like direct access to me. In terms of, yeah, the cost of the program, it really depends on your needs and your access to me. And we don't take on everybody for the program. Like, we have to see if you're a good fit first. So you'd have to apply, and then we'll look at the information you submit, and then we'll be able to go from there and kind of book a call to just do a quick interview just to see if you're a good fit for the program. Because I want to bring the right people in, and most of the people in this group, they're really positive. They want to get to that next level. They have that desire to get to the next level. But the other thing is we do like a little bit of a background check too, in terms of like your medical history, things like that, just to make sure there's no underlying issues. But yeah, definitely apply to the program. We could see if it's a good fit for you. We only take 8 people per group, and the next group is coming up in mid-March. Adjustment period, tally. Adjustment period, so we feel like crap. So what is this? We feel like crap, so we just rewire, get rid of the negative thoughts. Is there other brain retraining to do besides the pain centers? Nothing specific, tally. Like I said, just swat away negative thoughts as if you would swat away flies. You have to you have to like stop them in their tracks right away. That in itself is a brain retraining exercise. There's no fancy exercise to do it. That's pretty much what it is. And you might have to do it hundreds of times a day. And you have to be, this is the one area you have to be relentless, like absolutely relentless with this, because those thoughts, those negative thoughts will come hundreds of times a day, because that's what it's wired to do. So you need to get in between those negative thoughts and yourself and swat them away. That's the brain retraining exercise, I would say. I know it doesn't sound like the most exciting things, but that's what it is. At least that's what I found. Jana, yes, thank you. Sometimes I think my life is a game and I have to play it as well as I can. Yep. Yeah, that's what you want to think about it as, almost like video games with those adjustment periods. Those adjustment periods are bosses, and then you have to in order to get to the next level, you have to beat that boss. But most people don't beat that boss. They let the boss beat them. They let the adjustment period beat them and completely wipe them out emotionally and mentally. So yeah, think about it like almost like a video game. So Janet, can it also be helping to meditate, especially the meditations from Dr. Dispenza? He is also talking about rewiring the brain. Yeah, anything to help calm the nervous system down. But a lot of times, even with meditation, we're not really facing the real problem, unless Dr. Dispenza is talking about specifically what to do for CFS. That's the thing I found. It's like, you need something specific for CFS in order for it to really work. Because there's a lot of brain retrainings out there, a lot of brain retrainings out there that don't quite apply to CFS. So you want something that's CFS related. But yeah, in terms of meditation, the thing with meditation is I was meditating a lot when I was completely bedridden for 6 or 7 months, and I was getting worse. And that's because I wasn't facing the problem head on. Meditation is almost like trying to, at least for me, I was meditating from a perspective of like, I was trying to get away from all the problems. I was trying to run away from the symptoms. I was trying to avoid all of them. Whereas what I needed to do was face them and understand that like I can overcome them. The more I try to run away from them, the harder they hit me. Whereas like, if I were to just acknowledge them and this is the key, become indifferent to them, then that would have helped me so much more, because now I'm like changing my automatic response to my symptoms. Like they'll be there regardless, but I wouldn't fear them and wouldn't have as much anxiety. So yeah, meditation, it can help to a certain degree, for sure. How's it going, Jay? Number one thing that prevents my progress is my light sensitivity. The crash is usually from screen times. I use blue light blockers, dimmers, amber lights. Is it connected with something else? It is so life-limiting even when my body feels like it's progressing. The light issue brings me down in energy and 2 dozen other symptoms. Yeah, great question. I have another question for that. Is it just the light sensitivity? Because if it is, then like, and how long are you going on the computers for? Like how many hours per day are you having screen time? Because I had a big issue with light sensitivity before as well. I had to wear a blindfold 24/7. So this one can get a little more scientific. Like we have pain centers in the brain, and those centers are also, they're there for processing senses: smell, taste, touch, sight, sound, or whatever, if there's another one. But those centers in our brain, normally, in a normal person, it's like 90% responsible for, what is it? Like interpreting senses or processing senses: smell, taste, touch, sound, all those other things. And then 10% is for processing pain. Now with CFS, when we're in high stress states and we have this chronic pain, then those centers can shift to like 50% senses, 50% pain, if that makes sense. So a lot of times light can trigger a ton of symptoms because that processing center, now it's more dedicated to pain. So seeing light can trigger pain. It can trigger a bunch of other symptoms. Hearing sounds can trigger pain and other symptoms. Feeling a simple touch on your body can trigger a lot of pain and symptoms. I definitely experienced that because I was a very extreme state. Yeah, it felt like I was being electrocuted a lot of times. And even just someone closing the door in my house, that would give me a migraine. So I had to wear earplugs all the time. But yeah, I'm curious, how many hours are you on the screen per day, and where are you at in recovery? Like, are you able to walk around? Are you completely bedridden, housebound? Paint that picture and we'll be able to see what's going on here. Rosalind, when you have negative thoughts, are there certain things you find helpful to focus on instead? Yeah, for sure. So one of the things we do is, or I tell people to do, is like really figure out what you want to do when you get better. Like, what is the ideal scenario, the dream vacation, something that if you could snap your fingers that it would come true, and paint that picture for me. So that they'll paint that picture, they'll write it down, whatever. It's one of the tasks we have in week 1. But when you have that ultimate goal, it's a lot easier to swat away the negative thoughts, because you have this thing that you're being pulled towards, something that excites you, something that you're hopeful for the future. And the negative thoughts don't seem as big and terrifying when you have this ultimate goal at the end. So that's one of the things. Another thing is I would just, what is it? Yeah, negative thoughts. Oh, it wasn't just that one ultimate goal. There were like other visions that I had. Like, I want to go travel to this place and this place. I want to do all of these things. So I would think about those whenever I had the negative thoughts, as well as most of the negative thoughts I was having revolved around, like, it was these, I would say these basic thoughts. Am I actually getting better? Oh no, are these symptoms, I have these symptoms. Am I getting worse? How long is it going to take me to get better? Will I ever be able to run again? So those kind of things were the negative thoughts I was having. Oh, am I crashing? Am I going to get worse? Those are like the negative thoughts I was having, and that's probably what you're having too. And I think just understanding that having these thoughts is what's keeping us stuck and is very detrimental, and it increases our stress level, therefore increasing symptoms. I think that's when the flip switched for me. So I think just being aware of it, catching it, is probably step one. You're probably not even aware of like even 10% of the negative thoughts you're having, because this is another task we do, in week 1 is like we write down everything on paper, like, or in a document. What are your negative thoughts about, what are your, like, the emotional stressors, the thoughts you have, mental, physical bad habits. And then I tell people to do this for about 15 minutes, but they usually end up doing it way longer, because as soon as they start writing down all these limiting beliefs and the ideas start flowing, they get like pages and pages of this stuff. So first you need to identify what those negative thoughts are, so you're aware and you can recognize them when they come up. That's step 1. So for you, I just literally write down everything on paper right now, and you'd probably surprise yourself. And then once you do that, it's just understanding the science of how that affects your recovery. Essentially, like, the negative thoughts equals more stress equals more symptoms. And then that's when you get stuck in the cycle. More symptoms equal more stress, because we freak out about it. More stress, more freaking out, more symptoms. And then it's like the downward spiral. So I would definitely do that. That was some like very specific advice for you. So definitely do that. Tally. Yes, a lot of questions. Can you give us an example of a day for someone that is couch-bound, or is this overthinking? Do what you can and enjoy and swap the shitty thoughts away. Yeah, that's a tricky one. Honestly, like, this is not even for me, if I were to go back and was completely bedridden again, I think a lot of the stuff I would do would be internal, the way I'm rewiring my brain. It's not so much what you have to, not so much the things you do physically in the recovery, but it's what you do mentally when you're in that state in order to get better. But for someone that's couch-bound, yeah, like, don't think of it as if like you have to physically do something, because like 95% of the work is done internally. That's what I would say for that. Yeah, it really depends on what you like doing. It's different for everybody's situation. Try to find things that you can enjoy, like you actually enjoy, that when you're doing them, it makes you forget about time and you get to be in that moment. If you can find some of those things, then I would try to focusing on that. But we do need to try to not keep ourselves busy, do things throughout the day so that it doesn't feel like we're dragging on. So this is actually another thing we cover in like week 2 or 3 recovery jumpstart, is like a 30-day mini challenge. Do 5 things every single day for 30 days. Does not have to be hard at all. It could be something as simple, taking 10 deep breaths a day. Just something simple to get moving in the right direction, and something where, you know, you can really have a sense of purpose throughout the day. Because a lot of times when we don't have any tasks or anything on our to-do list, anything on our plate, we just feel like we're drifting through the day. And then one day it's so muddy, it like blends into the next day, and then the next day, and then before you know it, a week is blending into the next week. So if you feel really crappy one week, it just blends over, and there's no like reset button. You're never really a blank canvas. It's always that kind of negativity just dragging through, and that's just happening on autopilot. Like, it's just human nature. Some of those things we don't even realize it's going on, but it's like our brain is pulling us down. So yeah, we definitely need to do a lot of internal work when it comes to that kind of stuff. But yeah, try to find stuff you really enjoy that make you forget about this illness, and that keep you in the moment, even if it's just for like 1 or 2 seconds. Like, if you're coloring, try to just enjoy coloring on the paper for 2 to 3 seconds. It all starts with that little spark, and then it gets bigger and bigger over time. Just like with the brain retraining for chronic pain, you're only trying to lower the pain for like a split second at first. We're not trying to completely get rid of the pain, because that's not going to work. That's why it doesn't work for most people. But for the chronic pain stuff, I know you don't have chronic pain, Tally, but for other people, the goal for that exercise is to bring a pain from like a 7 to a 5 or a 6 to a 4, not for a pain to go from like a 9 to a 0, because that's just not going to work. I wish there was an exercise like that, but no, not quite. Jay, I have many other symptoms like walking too much or doing too much can cause crash or chemical EMF sound too. Not only light, but the biggest limiting thing right now. I have many other symptoms like walking too much walking too much. Yeah, Jay, are you like housebound or bedbound? It seems like you have to stay seated most of the day. It really depends. But yeah, it sounds like you're really just hypersensitive. You just kind of need to definitely stay away from the screen time then. If you're having a lot of issues even with EMF and sound, then you need to lower the stimulus you're putting on your nervous system. And when you say crash, this goes back to what I said earlier on this call. I'm not sure if you're here, but when you say crash, are you like completely wiped out for like 2 or 3 days, or do you just feel more symptoms? Because there's a big difference between the crash and the adjustment period. So which one is it? Thanks, Miguel. That's the hardest part, not feeling well enough to do a puzzle or something low key. So we lay there with eyes closed and that's where you're stuck. Yeah. Yeah. And yeah, you might not feel well enough to do a puzzle or something like that, but you're never going to feel like ready for that next step. That's why it's better to, you know, slowly do things. And even a puzzle, actually, there's a lot of thinking involved in that when I really think about it. So I probably wouldn't even do a puzzle because there is like a lot of mental activity. Honestly, if you could just journal, like journaling, I would always journal. That's something I tell people to do all the time. It's like write down like the ideal scenarios you would want to 3 years from now or 5 years from now, wherever. Like if I could snap my finger, this is something I used to ask people when I was trying to sell them personal training as well. It's like, if I could snap my fingers, how would you want to look and feel down the road? What does that look and feel like? Are you on a beach somewhere, whatever? So I always tell people, it's like, what is that vision you have for your future? Is it being able to hike up a mountain in Hawaii? That was my vision and it was great. Do you want to go travel the world? Do you want to go to Bali, the Maldives? Do you want to go camping, hiking? All these things, write it down and write in detail what that looks and feels like. What are you wearing? Where is the hike? Or what are you doing? What kind of food are you eating? What does it taste like? Is there music playing in the background? Is it a nice restaurant? It's like, you want to get into the details because your brain, it has a hard time distinguishing what's real and what's not. Like thoughts are all the same to it. So you need to feed it all these things to snap it out of that. That's what I would do. Okay, guys, I have a few minutes on there. I have time for like 3 more questions. So first question is, how much do you walk? Just curious. Oh yeah, Jen is asking Jay, how much do you walk? Just curious. I'm finding out for myself what I can do without making more symptoms. Jana, back to this, it's like the symptoms are part of the process. If you're trying to avoid symptoms altogether, you won't be able to get to that next level. Because remember that analogy, it's like the boss is like the adjustment period. If you're able to get through that, then you get to the next level and it becomes easier. But if you avoid the symptoms, then you can't get to the next level. It's just impossible. Doesn't mean like go and make yourself crash or anything, but it's okay for some symptoms to come. It's actually necessary. Rosalind, how do you know when you're at the point where you can add a little bit more activity, and how do you know how much to add at that time and how often to increase it? Really great question. We have a whole week dedicated to this stuff. Actually, it's this week. I'm about to hop on a call in an hour for Recovery Jumpstart, but this whole week we're learning about expanding activity. So it'll be tricky to break this down, quickly because we cover this for hours in the program. But essentially, you need to recognize where you're at in terms of symptoms on like a scale. You only really want to increase activity when your symptoms are lower than like a 4 out of 10. So this is where you need to go back and think of, okay, like having no symptoms at all was 0. Having my worst symptoms I've ever felt in my life was a 10. If the symptoms are like maximum 4 out of 10 and under, then you can increase a little bit. And when I say increase, you want to increase by like 10% at a time. 10%, I know it's very hard to gauge that. And don't be super literal about this. Like if you're taking approximately 800 steps a day, you don't need to walk 880 steps a day. It's just approximately 10%. Do a little bit more than what you would normally do. And then right away pull back after 1 or 2 days of doing it. So to let your body adjust. In terms of how often you increase it, it really depends on how fast you come out of the adjustment period. So I think I just released a video on YouTube about adjustment periods. Definitely watch that, as well as some of my other videos, like how to recover from CFS. Let me see if I could find it, if I could find that specific video, because that kind of breaks it down as well. It's really subjective to the situation. So in terms of like frequency and how often, depends person to person. Hold on, give me a second. Where is this? I think it's this one. Okay, I can't find it. I'll post it later. Jason, no, I'm not housebound. Severe symptoms. I feel like I need medication to calm my nervous system down, but I cannot tolerate SSRIs or Ativan. Still looking for medication that works for me. Yeah, Jason, back to the question, like, what are you able to do during the day? Because without knowing that, like, I don't know a baseline where you're at, or I don't know like what you can do, what you can't do. There's no like context for where you're at right now on what you need to do. Like, what are you able to do on a day-to-day basis? Are you able to walk around? Things like that. And so right here, where you say, I feel like I need medication to calm my nervous system down. Yeah, that tells me you're really feeling wired and buzzing. Your nervous system is definitely hypersensitive. All of ours are. And you cannot tolerate SSRIs or Ativan. So that means you've tried it before. Yeah, you're going to have to work on a lot of stuff like internally. And yeah, just really distinguish, is it really a crash or is it an adjustment period? I covered this in like the beginning of this video. So you like be super honest with yourself, because a lot of times we can exaggerate the symptoms in terms of like not saying like symptoms aren't horrible, but our thoughts will make the symptoms way worse than they are. And then emotionally, when we're in a hole, the adjustment periods feel like way worse. So a lot of the intensity of the symptoms really is determined by like our perception of them as well. Doesn't mean that if we don't think about it, we're not going to feel it, but we can limit how much worse it gets a lot of the times. Okay, so you can walk around for 20 minutes. Yeah, we need to figure out like where you're stuck at, like what are the big things holding you back. Guarantee like 99% chance that you have, I would say the same thing to you as what I said for, who was it? I think it was Jana. But basically you have to take inventory of all of your negative thoughts, like write it all down as much as you can, because you need to become aware of what's going on up here. Guarantee there are tons of things that are holding you back right now. And I'd recommend everybody do that. Like that's what I have everybody do in the program. Because without knowing what's going on, it's just gonna be like a gong show up here in our thoughts. It's just like a big muddled mess. And it's like having a massive knot within 100 knots, and it's like you can't untangle it. So you need to individually like figure out, okay, what are the different negative thoughts? Now I can compartmentalize a lot of that. But yep, I got to jump, guys. I got another call, but it was great doing this call. We'll do it again sometime soon. Nick. Okay, one quick question actually. Nick Silverman, is it useful stopping negative thoughts hundreds of times a day? I think you know the answer to that. Yes, 1000%. You have to stop the negative thoughts hundreds of times a day for sure. I actually mentioned that earlier on this call. Yeah, you have to be relentless with it, with the negative thoughts. It's repetition. It is the repetition, but also not pushing yourself so far that you're crashing every time and then you have to override the negative thoughts. You have to do the right things physically too, but with the negative thoughts, that's usually the hardest part. So when you can deal with that, everything else falls into place. Then you also got to be smart about how you expand activity. But yeah, guys, it was great. Thank you so much for all the kind words. And yeah, just post in this group anytime. I'm working on plans to build out this Discord group so we can have a lot more direct communication with everybody, a lot more support. So that should be coming up within a couple months. A lot of cool things in the pipeline for this, more resources to help you guys out. And if you guys were interested, if you wanted to apply and see if you're a good fit for the program, like this was an hour-long call, but with each call in Recovery Jumpstart, they're like 2 hours long, and you're getting information like this, but more specific. And there's like a couple calls a week. So you get lots of help for sure. So if you did want to check that out, you can visit the link here. So hope you guys all have a great day, and just take care. Remember, your success is determined by how well you respond to symptoms. So remember, you're just one mind shift away, literally one mind shift away from living a life with thriving health. So just remember that, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Cheers.